The Jougan is a powerful dojutsu of which we know very little. It made a brief appearance in the manga that almost everyone missed, but has become more prevalent in the anime, where it was used during the Nue Arc to help Boruto detect Dark Chakra that the beast gave off. Because of the fact that we know very little about it, I just want to go absolutely wild and just make up a story about if Naruto had it. Perhaps something off the beaten path. I'm just feeling real creative today. I hope you don't mind. So please, direct your gaze up towards the moon and enter our Infinite Tsukuyomi, to a world where Naruto was born with the Jougan. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. A baby wailed in the night. The moon was high in the sky and passing over them full, giving off a gentle blue light as if nature itself was attempting to soothe the distressed infant that found itself laying there in the grass. It was a cold October night, yet the skies were alight with flames. An attack, or perhaps an accident. Which it was had become unknown. The Ninetales had somehow escaped. Was it let out? Did it merely slip out through childbirth? These were all questions on the mind of Hiruzen Sarutobi as he approached the scene. Also in the grass, laying dead, were the baby's parents, slaughtered by the nine-tailed demon fox. But despite their unfortunate passing, victory was achieved through their efforts. The powerful fox sealed away within the body of the babe that now cried in the cold. Hiruzen picked it up. It had been quite some time since Hiruzen was able to hold a baby like this. He had 2 children of his own, but each of them were grown by now and off doing their own thing. It felt nostalgic to hold the baby in his arms. All the same, his heart shattered for the infant, whose cries reached up to the heavens. It subconsciously must have known it was in danger and was now dealing with the after effects. Its tiny body shivered in his grasp, so he attempted to hold it just a little closer to his chest. He looked back to the others. "Contact the council. The 4th Hokage has been killed." The 2 Anbu agents flanking him nodded in understanding and left. Hiruzen looked down at the baby in his arms and gave a solemn smile, a way of saying it would be okay, even if the baby couldn't really see it. Returning to Konoha proper, he entered the hospital with the baby in his arms. The hospital was packed to the brim with wounded survivors, some already treated, some needing CPR after cardiac arrest. It was like walking into a war zone. Despite this, the NICU was fairly quiet and mostly empty. There were a few babies there, those that just so happened to be born during the unfortunate attack. Hiruzen was glad that someone was watching over them, because in the face of this travesty, this building was the one building that needed to stay standing. And thankfully, not a single brick seemed to have been damaged. He called a nurse over. She seemed tired, frazzled, a nervous wreck. Hiruzen was almost too scared to give her the baby as he was afraid she might drop it, but she was a capable medical nin. He handed the child over to the nurse and she put it with the rest of the babies, recording the name that Hiruzen had given it. Hiruzen looked in for a single moment before the Anbu came to him. "The council have just met. You've been reappointed our Hokage until a suitable replacement can be found." Hiruzen knew that he didn't have much of a choice. He accepted this and watched the child. As time passed, they checked it over. The day after, Hiyashi Hyuga was working with his clan to help rebuild the compound. Thankfully, the place was not hit too hard, but it had been struck by the debris from the attack. He would receive word from one of the shinobi within his clan that he'd been summoned by the 3rd Hokage to go to the Konoha hospital. He could only guess what this was about. He feared that one of his clansmen was gravely wounded, so he set off with haste. Reaching the hospital, he was told to head to the NICU. His mind began firing in a new direction. He was now afraid that it was a clan member baby that was grievously wounded. He made his way to the ward and saw Hiruzen standing there, still wearing his battle armor. Much like Hiyashi, he had not slept the rest of the night. "Lord Third," he said upon drawing closer, "what's the issue?" Hiruzen pointed into the ward at little Naruto. He looked at Hiyashi. "You keep records on all your clansmen, correct?" Hiyashi nodded. "Yes, we like to pride ourselves on tracking our clan's family tree all the way back to its foundation. Why do you ask?" Hiruzen then asked a question that left Hiyashi confused. "Were Minato Namikaze or Kushina Uzumaki ever counted among your clan?" Hiyashi looked around to see if this was a joke. "No. I'm certain we would have heard about it if either of them were." Hiruzen stroked his goatee. "Are you sure? Is it possible that Minato or Kushina could have somehow been born from an affair one of your members had? Something maybe you were too ashamed to acknowledge? Hiyashi almost seemed to take offense to this, but took a deep breath. I suppose anything is possible, my lord. Again, why do you ask? Hiruzen turned his attention back to Naruto. That baby there is Naruto. He is the only child of Minato Namikaze and Kushina Uzumaki. He possesses a Byakugan. Hiyashi looked back to Hiruzen with surprise. A Byakugan? That's impossible. Hiruzen would open the door. Come, I'll show you myself. Hiyashi followed Hiruzen in. As they walked, Hiruzen spoke. Let's hope we're lucky. It only activates sometimes. They stand near the baby. Hiruzen motions to it. Hiyashi looks down at the infant, which appears to be awake but attempting to sleep. Hiyashi carefully reaches down and pulls back its eyelids. Within the socket of the baby's head was what appeared to be a Byakugan, but totally different. What the hell? He let go of the lids as the baby opened its eyes to look at Hiyashi. Its right eye's sclera was black and its pupil was a light blue color, with what seemed to be eyeshine, as if this baby had a similar eye structure to a cat. Hiruzen looked to his friend and raised a brow. See? A Byakugan! Hiyashi shook his head. I don't know what that is, but I don't think it's a Byakugan. Hiruzen seemed confused. Then what is it? Hiyashi looked closely. I don't know. It seems to be of the same family as a Byakugan though. Perhaps a mutation? He looked at it. It's an interesting dojutsu, and seems closely related to my clan's secret jutsu, but I can't be sure. Does this child have anywhere to go? Hiruzen shook his head. Hiyashi looked down at it. Is it okay with you if my clan claims him as a member? Hiruzen motioned to the child as if to say, go right ahead. The baby had no family, and to Hiruzen, the concept that the child might find a loving family and kinship within one of Konoha's most prestigious clans made him glad. Minato deserved that much. And so, when the baby was able to be released, he was taken to the Hyuga clan compound, where he'd be raised by them, particularly by Hiyashi himself, who treated the child with care and love, just as he treated his own daughter, Hinata. And as the child grew, so did the mystery of its dojutsu. Again! Hiyashi called out. Naruto stood there, his left palm out, his right by his side. Awakening his Jogan, he began to see the tenketsu within Neji's body. He stepped forward into the strikes and began to try and close off his adversary's tenketsu. But this was not some test to be done in a training dummy. Neji was allowed to hit back, and Neji possessed raw, unfiltered potential. He seemed to be learning more about the gentle fist techniques than Naruto was. In fact, by this point, Neji was already practically a master in the 8 trigrams techniques, which was supposed to be what Naruto was learning. Hinata sat upon the steps and watched. Naruto attempted to strike his tenketsu, but instead Neji spun away from the strike and tapped 5 of Naruto's and knocked him back. Naruto hit the ground and his right arm went limp, unable to be moved. Hiyashi sighed. What could he say? It just didn't seem that Naruto had the right genes. The Hyuga clan were known primarily because of their Byakugan, but the one thing that they could do that no other clan could was expel chakra from every single one of their tenketsu across their bodies, not just the ones on their hand and feet. This was where much of their advantage came from. Their bodies were built to utilize the most deadly form of taijutsu, but Naruto didn't seem to be. His body possessed a dojutsu that appeared to be of the same family tree as the Byakugan, but he could only expel chakra from his hands and feet, meaning his usage of the gentle fist style was severely limited, with the more defensive techniques such as the 8 trigrams palm rotation. Naruto did not seem to be capable of using this, as he just didn't have the genetics that allowed for it. But if not, then why did he have one of these dojutsu? Was it possible that this technique was not of a Hyuga origin? Hiyashi sighed and turned away from Naruto and began to walk off. Naruto saw this and felt his shoulder drop further. Neji turned around and also left. Hinata walked over to him and helped him up. It's okay, Naruto. He looks at me like that too. Naruto looked down. I just want to make him proud of me. He's raised me since birth, since my own parents died. I just want him to feel proud. She gave him a gentle smile. I'm sure he is. You're very special, Naruto. You've got a very different Byakugan, and I think he's just frustrated because we don't know anything about it. Naruto looked down. Maybe you're right. Maybe that's what this is. Hinata's melancholic smile grew lighter. That's right. Now why don't you come and play with me and Hanabi? I bet you just need some time to let it all sink in. Sometimes I learn more during the time I'm not training than the time I am. Naruto would follow her off. Hiyashi would view this from around the corner before stepping into the main hall where his own father was, the elder. He knelt down beside his father, sitting at a table as the elderly man looked over papers while smoking a pipe. Have you found anything? He asked him. The elder looked to him. I'm not sure. Hiyashi looked to his father in curiosity. Does that mean you've discovered something? The elder looked to him. I am certain that the dojutsu Naruto possesses is of the same class as the Byakugan, but it seems to be purer, a pure eye. For now, I've become accustomed to calling it a Jougan. It's most definitely not a Byakugan, but it is something in the family line. Hiyashi listened to his father. Do you have any leads on it? I'm unsure. There's some information here. Pieces of an old legend. From the very beginning of our clan, prior to the Warring States period. Most of this information was lost during the fighting, but there is a legend saying that we're descended from the Sage of Six Paths' brother. Hiyashi was surprised. Wait, the sage had a brother? The elder nodded. According to this, his clan left this world to protect it from the heavens. They went to the moon. Hiyashi looked to the elder. There's a branch of the Hyuga on the moon. The elder looked to Hiyashi. It was said to be true, but that was a long time ago, and it can be hard for us to know for certain what's true and what isn't. We have almost zero information on this clan. For all I know, we could be reading an excerpt from a children's bedtime story. Hiyashi nodded. He stood and walked outside and sat down on the porch and looked at the orange sky as night began to threaten the world with gentle darkness. He saw the moon in the sky. A moon clan, he sighed, and continued to think deeply. That night, Hiyashi was laying in bed with his wife, unable to sleep as he thought deeply about what Naruto's dojutsu, the supposed Jougan, could be. The Moon Clan. Was there truly such a group? As he lay there trying to sleep, he felt himself drifting off. Suddenly, there was a blood-curdling scream. Hiyashi sat up as soon as he did. He wondered if maybe it was just a dream, but then his wife looked over to him and spoke. Was that Naruto? Hiyashi rose from his bed and raced down the hall to find Neji running towards the room as well. They opened the door to find Naruto in his bed, pressed against the wall as two figures stood over him. Neji entered the room. Who are you? Suddenly the two figures turned. Their skin as pale as milk, their hair lightly colored, the sheen or perhaps the filtering in moonlight giving it a light blue color. One was tall, possessing long hair and a beard. The other seemed to be a child about the same age as Naruto. The older one spoke. Are you Hiyashi Hyuga? Hiyashi stood there, the veins around his Byakugan bulging. I am. Now, who are you? The older one spoke. I am Tallius Otsutsuki, and this is my son Teneri. The child offered a slight bow to them. Hiyashi stood there, still in a defensive position, his hands raised. Naruto was still pressed against the wall. They ain't got no eyeballs, uncle. They ain't got no eyeballs. Hiyashi ignored Naruto's statements. He returned his gaze to the two figures. What are you doing here? The older man, now identified as Tallius, spoke. We are here to speak to you, Hiyashi, about the Moon Clan. Hiyashi's eyes widened. How did you know about that? The man smiled and spoke. Because we are of that clan. Hiyashi sat at the table. By his side was Naruto, who, still a little startled, was calm now. The two guests to their house politely had their eyelids closed, as to not startle anyone with their, as Naruto had put it, lack of eyeballs. The maid, fresh out of bed, had put on the pot and was now pouring a cup of tea for the four of them. Neji, meanwhile, stood leaning against the door, watching. He had refused the tea. Hinata and Hanabi were peering in as well. Once the tea was poured, Hiyashi looked up. Thank you, Natsu. You may be excused. She offered a slight bow and then turned to leave. Hiyashi then looked to his two guests. What brings you to Earth? Tallius then spoke. We have visited it on many occasions to observe our brethren on Earth, the Hyuga clan. It was today that it was just such an occasion when we were observing you silently that we heard you speak of our clan. Why were you observing us so secretly? Neji asked with skepticism and a hint of malice. Tallius looked back at him. We feared knowledge of us might startle you. And besides, there aren't many of us left. Only my son and I are left of our people, so we can be hardly called a clan. We did not think it our place to meddle in your affairs. Teneri, eyes still closed, would sense Hinata looking at him. He would smile and wave. This freaked Hinata out, who proceeded to hide behind Neji. Hiyashi continued. So, you heard of me speaking of your clan, and you wish to introduce yourselves. Why? Tallius took a sip of his tea and let out a sigh of pleasure. He then turned his attention back to Hiyashi. We heard you speaking of a variant of the Byakugan that you knew nothing about. Hiyashi seemed surprised. He looked down at Naruto, who currently had it active. He then looked back at his two guests. "What do you know of it?" Talius then spoke. "Our records are completed, and we have much information going all the way back to Hamada Otsutsuki, the founder of both of our clans. He himself possessed a special variant of the Byakugan, and we're interested to see if what your youth there possesses is the same as he. It could mark him as the reincarnation of Hamada Otsutsuki. We were wondering if we could take him back with us to our palace and study him." Hiyashi thought about this. "I don't know." Naruto looked up. "Uncle, do you really want to pass this up? We could finally learn why my Byakugan is different." Hiyashi thought about it. "Well, okay. I get to come with him." Talius would nod. "This sounds like a fair deal. If you wish, we'll go now." Hiyashi would stand. "Let us go now then." Talius would stand, as would Toneri. "Follow us. There is a secret passageway near here that serves as an entrance to our home on the moon, crafted by Hamada himself." Neji, Hinata, Hanabi, Naruto, and Hiyashi would gather what they thought they might need and would all follow Talius to the moon. Hiyashi would leave his father in charge, who vowed to keep the Hyuga safe until his son's return. Hiyashi and his group would step into the palace. It was rather large and awe-inspiring, looking like some ancient castle used in some story about princesses and knights. Talius looked back. "There are plenty of rooms with which you may rest." Hiyashi nodded. "Hinata, Hanabi, Naruto, Neji, go to bed." Suddenly, Toneri grabbed Hinata's hand. "Come on, let's go play," he shouted as he ran off with the kids. Hiyashi watched them run off. Or not. Toneri went to the stairs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. He would take a right and then start counting again until he reached the number 8. He ran down the hall, his left hand out to the wall, feeling the doors as he ran past. He counted to the number 12 and then opened the door and stepped in. He held out his arms as if presenting his room to them. "Wow," Hanabi said as she looked at it. The bed was so big and there were so many toys beside and within the chest. There was a little table that had paper on it and a bookcase that had plenty of books. Hanabi ran to the toy chest first to take a look at what was inside. Toneri opened it for her and felt around within until he found something. What appeared to be a bunny possessing a third eye on its forehead. "This is one of my favorite ones, but you can have it, Hanabi." Hanabi was shocked. "I can just keep it?" Toneri nodded. She hugged him. "Thank you so much." Naruto looked at the books and pulled one from the shelf. He opened it up and was surprised by what he saw. "Hey, this book's blank." Toneri walked over to it and held his hand out to the book. Toneri ran his fingers across each page. "Oh, I like this story." Naruto was confused. Toneri took Naruto's hand and pressed his finger to the page. Naruto was a little shocked. "I feel markings." Toneri nodded. "My people use a different language. We use this pen that's shaped like a scalpel to make marks in the paper. Then when we press our fingers to it, we can read it." Naruto ran his finger across the page. "Ouch!" He put his finger in his mouth to stop the bleeding. Toneri turned his head to him. "Paper cut?" "Mm-hmm," Naruto said, his finger in his mouth. Toneri nodded. "Yeah, it'll do that to you. My father calls our language a bloody language. Reading it is dangerous." Haha, Hinata yawned. "What time is it?" Toneri shrugged. "I don't know. I don't keep a clock in my room." Hinata looked at him. "You don't keep a clock? Then how do you know when it's time to go to bed and when to wake up?" Toneri cocked his head at her. "Whenever I'm tired or fully rested, I guess. You don't do that?" Hinata shook her head. "No, generally we go to bed or wake up when the sun goes down or comes up." Toneri nodded. "Yeah, well, it's always night on the moon, so it doesn't really matter. Not to mention, sleep cycles get thrown off easily when you're blind." Hinata looked at him. "Why are you blind, Toneri?" He thought about it. "Because it's tradition. When you're born, the elders remove your Byakugan and place it inside the Tenseigan. It protects our people." She cocks her head. "But isn't it sad to always be blind?" Toneri shook his head. "Nope, I'm not blind." Naruto's face showed obvious confusion. "You lost me." Toneri looked back. "I'm not blind. I can see, just in a different way from you. I can use all my senses. I use smell, touch, sound. I can tell everything I need to know about you just by being near you." Naruto laughs. "Oh? And what can you tell me about me?" Toneri thinks about it. "I can tell that you're very egotistical but have no actual talent for anything. Oh, and that you've sworn an oath against taking a bath." Neji burst out laughing in the corner. Everyone turned in Neji's direction. Hinata's mouth was agape. "I've never seen him laugh before." Toneri was so surprised that his lids flew open, despite being unable to see anything. "Sounds unnatural." Downstairs, Hiyashi was having about the same amount of issue as Naruto was with the books. He was attempting to use his Byakugan. This is very hard to read. He could at least understand that the written language used was very similar to that used in Konoha and the rest of the world, though it had seemingly evolved slightly differently. But the real issue was that the words were not written in ink, but merely carved into each page, which made it hard to read. Talius came over. Ah, yes, my bad. He ran his fingers across it and began to describe the information within, stopping once Hiyashi stated that it wasn't what he was looking for. Together, they continued to search until they came across a book. Talius sat down with Hiyashi and began to explain to him what he had come to know. It was said that there was a variation of the Byakugan out there, an evolution of it that had only been awakened by Hamada Otsutsuki. You see, in the past, Hamada was born as the twin brother of the Sage of Six Paths, Hagoromo. He and his brother fought against the evil Ten Tails. Hiyashi was surprised. Wait, there's a 10 Tails? I thought it stopped at 9. Talius shook his head. The 9 chakra beasts on your planet are all derived from the 10 Tails. It was defeated by both Hagoromo and Hamada, who sealed it away onto the moon with the Six Paths Chibaku Tensei. Hagoromo would later go on to father 2 sons, Indra and Ashura. Hamada would also give birth to twins, a son and a daughter. As his clan grew, he knew that should the threat of the Ten Tails ever return, his people would need to be ready. So they came to the moon to guard it. Hamada, possessing the power of the Six Paths, possessed a set of eyes awakened from the Byakugan, known as the Tenseigan. It was said to be capable of destroying even entire worlds should the need arise. On his deathbed, however, Hamada desired for his Tenseigan to never be used for evil, and had them sealed away into a vessel named after his visual technique. It became tradition from that point onward that a Byakugan be removed after birth and sealed into the Tenseigan. With it, we might have the ability to defend ourselves and the earth from threat should one arise. But alas, our clan split into 2 different clans after Hamada's death. Cursed with hatred, they fought each other until mine came out victorious, but only after destroying the other with the Tenseigan. Alas, my son and I are the only survivors from that war. Hiyashi listened. This almost reminded him of the Warring States period from which the Hidden Leaf had spawned, a conflict just as hateful. But it seemed that the Hyuga clan were lucky compared to their branch family members on the moon. What were the properties of the Tenseigan, he asked. Talius responded. The Tenseigan was said to be blue, and possessed the appearance of the Saraswara within it. Hiyashi thought about it. The Saraswara, the 1,000-petaled lotus, a symbol of renewal. Talius nodded. Indeed, it's why the dojutsu is called the Tenseigan, the reincarnation eye. Hiyashi stopped and cocked his head as he thought about it. Something didn't seem right. But Naruto's eye doesn't have a lotus pattern in it. Talius listened. It doesn't. Hiyashi shook his head. Talius tapped the other side of his cheek as he thought about it. The Tenseigan is the only thing we have other than the Byakugan. Back in Teneri's bedroom, the kids were just enjoying their time. Teneri was showing Naruto and Hinata something. He was using one of these sharp, inkless pens to write something into the paper. Suddenly, on the outside, he pressed a little harder and managed to cut right through. He moved the paper and his hand as he did so with such skill one might not realize he were blind. Suddenly, he pulled it free. He held it up. It was a heart. He gave it to Hinata. She blushed a little. Thanks, but I can't read it. Teneri gave her a slight smile. It's okay. You will someday. Oh, isn't that sweet? A voice came. Teneri felt a shiver down his spine. Hinata turned and stood. Who is that? Teneri didn't look back. He merely whispered to her, I don't know. Hinata's eyes widened. She looked at the monstrous figure. His face was as pale as a character in no theater, yet there was no red makeup to offset the lack of color. He looked similar to those of Teneri's kind, but he also possessed a set of sharp horns atop his head. I'm just an old acquaintance of your father's. Just so happened to be in the neighborhood and heard that there's someone here with a special dojutsu. He saw Naruto's eyes and took a silent gasp of revelation. Impossible. It cannot be. Teneri stood and stepped between Naruto, Hinata, Hanabi, and this mysterious figure. I do not know who you are. If you're an acquaintance of my father's, then pardon my rudeness, but you should probably be downstairs with him instead of up here with us. The man laughed. But our business isn't with him. It's with you. Teneri listened. Our? Suddenly there was another presence in the room that he hadn't sensed before. A massive man, yet his chakra was so hard to sense. The burly Otsutsuki stepped forward and Teneri stepped in front of him. Not another step. The Otsutsuki would backhand Toneri, knocking him across the room. Toneri would hit a wall and fall down. Neji stepped forward and entered his fighting stance. 8 trigrams, 64 palms! He jumped forward and began to strike out at the man with everything he had. But when he finished, the burly Otsutsuki did not fall. He looked down at him. Lord Momoshiki, may I kill this brat? The smaller Otsutsuki raised his hand. Kill any of them. All of them. Just leave the one with the yellow hair alive. Kinshiki raised his hand and a chakra axe appeared. He took a swing at Neji, who rolled to the side. Naruto, he called out. Neji then grabbed both Hinata and Hanabi's hands and rushed out with them. Naruto ran over and helped Toneri up and began running along too. They ran out the door and into the hall. Momoshiki and Kinshiki appeared behind them. They began to walk down the hall after them. Talius and Hiyashi were studying when suddenly they heard a scream. They both stood and ran out into the great room. There they saw Neji run into the center of the room with Hinata and Hanabi as Naruto ran past with Toneri, who was bleeding. Neji let go of their arms and turned around and entered a fighting stance as Momoshiki and Kinshiki casually stepped down the stairs. Hanabi and Hinata ran to Hiyashi. Talius stepped out. Momoshiki, what are you doing here? Momoshiki sat on the rail of the stairs. I came to check up on your ghetto statue search, but it seems I found something even more interesting. Talius stood there. You stay away from them. Momoshiki scoffed. You don't even know what you have there, do you? He said, pointing at Naruto. Momoshiki saw the looks on their faces. I thought not. Can't expect much more from a mixed branch who can't see past their own humanity. Talius stepped forward and formed a sword from his own chakra, the same way Kinshiki had. I will not let you harm them. Momoshiki stepped forward. He stood right before Talius. It's not your choice. Talius swung his blade, but Momoshiki dodged under it and put a fist through Talius's stomach. Talius coughed out blood as he fell to his knees. Momoshiki removed his hand from his stomach and began wiping the blood off with a towel. Kinshiki seemed surprised by this event. Lord Momoshiki, we're not supposed to kill a fellow clansman. Momoshiki looked back. Look at him, he's mostly human. He's only Otsutsuki in name. He then stepped forward toward Hiyashi. Neji stepped between them. Momoshiki looked down at him in disgust. More tainted blood. Momoshiki knocked him out of the way. Neji went sliding. Hiyashi pushed Naruto behind him. Take the others and run. Naruto seemed hesitant, but upon looking at Momoshiki, he had no choice but to oblige. Naruto ran out of the palace and out onto the surface of the moon. The cave had to be nearby. Hiyashi stood there, palms at the ready. He would attempt to strike as many tenketsu as he possibly could, extending the 64 palms into a staggering 128, a sign of his prowess. But alas, Momoshiki did not budge. It's not hard to defend against this. All I have to do is release more chakra than you do at the point of the tenketsu you're striking. Your taijutsu is useless against me. With a simple strike, he knocked Hiyashi through a window and proceeded out toward the surface, where Naruto and the others had fled. Toneri would awaken in the great hall and sense his father. He could smell blood. He rushed to him. Father! Father! He reached out and felt a warm substance. Father! Talius reached out and touched Toneri's cheek. Toneri, I'm sorry. Toneri shook his head. Father, no, don't die. Don't leave me all alone. Talius shook his head. But you won't be alone. You have friends in the Hyuga. He took a deep breath and coughed up blood. Toneri, go to Earth with them. Make friends. Live a long life. Toneri cried for his father. Talius then spoke. You must save your friends. The Tenseigan. Go to the vessel and claim it. The final gift of our people to you. He leaned forward and kissed his son's cheek. I will always be with you. Talius then passed away. Naruto ran with Hinata's hand in his. To his side was Neji running with Hanabi. Neji's Byakugan were active. The tunnel must be around here somewhere. Where is it? Suddenly he pointed out, it's there. They then began to run toward it, but suddenly they were stopped. The imposing figure of Kinshiki appeared in front of them. Behind them, a voice spoke. You thought you could run from us? Fools. I would go to the end of this universe, to the ends of every universe, just to claim what you have. And now, you're going to give it to me. Neji stepped in the way. Naruto stepped in the way too. He might not have been able to use the 8 trigrams palm rotation, but he could still use the gentle fist. Hinata was also prepared for a fight, as was Hanabi. Momoshiki laughed. This is too cute to be terrifying. Such little people hoping to stand against gods. You know what we are, right? We're gods. And what are you? Suddenly, a new voice sounded off. or perhaps a familiar one. "They're my friends." Momoshiki turned around to see Toneri standing there. "Oh, has the little half-breed come to defend his little friends? How adorable." Toneri shook his head as his eyes opened, displaying tears and the Tenseigan. "No, I've come to kill you." Suddenly, Toneri powered up to a chakra mode as Truth-Seeker orbs began to hover around him. He took off like a rocket and slammed into Momoshiki, the two of them going flying. Seeing that Momoshiki was being dealt with by Toneri, Neji and the others turned around to focus their attacks on Kinshiki. Momoshiki went rolling. He stood to see Toneri hovering there, looking down upon him with a judging gaze, a hint of blood still present in his tears from the fresh transplant. Momoshiki grunted, "You little runt. You just died. You know that? You just died." He stood up and rushed at Toneri with his hands at the ready. Toneri would fire a truth-seeking orb at Momoshiki, who would use the Rinnegan on his hand to absorb the jutsu and fire back at him. Toneri would go rolling. He was astounded at the counter. He managed to stand. Momoshiki would look down on the child. "You're the spawn of that sentimental fool. You stand against everything that is the Otsutsuki clan, and you barely possess any of our blood. You're an abomination, an affront to my kind. I'll wipe you from the face of this world, and then I'll claim that brat for my own and eradicate that planet over there. And there's not a thing that you can do about it." All the while, Neji, Naruto, Hinata, and Hanabi were busy facing Kinshiki. His power was so strong, and despite everything Neji tried, he couldn't bring him down. Neji knelt, battered and bruised, as the other kids lay behind him in the same condition. "Lady Hinata, Lady Hanabi, I'm sorry. I've failed as your retainer." Naruto sat up. "No, we haven't lost yet. We just need to work harder." Together, they both rose to their feet. "Our jutsu is useless, Naruto. He can see it coming and stop us. It's no use." Hinata rose to her feet. "No, it's not. All we need to do is overwhelm him. He can't stop all of us." Hanabi stood. "He's just us stronger. All we have to do is figure out how we would beat ourselves and then use it to beat him." Neji thought about it for a moment. He looked back. "I have a plan." Kinshiki watched as the little ones plotted against him. What could they possibly think up that could ever defeat him? It was pointless. Neji once more engaged Momoshiki in direct combat as the others circled around him. Naruto was the second to launch an attack, then Hinata, and finally Hanabi. Each was striking out at him from a different direction. Suddenly they launched into a new attack. A team jutsu that they titled Gentle Fist, Divine Wind of the Four Cardinal Directions. Each of them began to attempt the 64 palms, or at least strike out in a similar manner to it as fast as they could. Kinshiki was attempting to keep up, but Hanabi had him pegged. It was in this blind spot that she made her first undefended contact. This caused a disruption in not only Kinshiki's ability to control his chakra, but also his ability to focus his vision. After this, the floodgates opened. This was when they managed to hit Kinshiki over 256 times in 256 of the 361 Tenketsu, which would cause sudden cardiac arrest and total arrest of the chakra pathway system, resulting in the demise of Kinshiki. Naruto pumped his fist. "Yeah, it worked!" The four of them then turned to see Toneri on the ropes against Momoshiki. They each decided to help him. Toneri rose to his feet. His breathing was quick. He looked up at Momoshiki, who himself had sustained injuries, albeit far less than himself. "I'll commend you. You possess incredible strength. Truly, you are the blood of the Otsutsuki, but it all ends here." Hinata raced past Momoshiki, drawing his attention. Hanabi then jumped up behind him. Boop! She then struck the same Tenketsu she had against Kinshiki. The four of them then attempted to gang up on Momoshiki. They each went to strike out at his Tenketsu. Amazingly, Momoshiki was doing far better at keeping up with them than Kinshiki had, but they knew he would wear down. Suddenly, Momoshiki let out a roar and performed the 8 trigrams palm rotation. He knocked them all back. "You fools! Even if you gang up on me, you can never hope to kill me. I'm a god! You're nothing! You hear me? You're Suddenly, Momoshiki stopped talking. A massive chakra blade came down and passed through him, going all the way down through the moon, splitting both Momoshiki and the moon in two. Toneri stood there. Some god. After this, Hiyashi raced to them. He checked to see if they were all okay. They each had minor wounds, but nothing substantial. Hiyashi, by this time, was done and ready to leave. They all were. He walked them back to the cave and prepared to enter. Hiyashi looked back at Toneri. "Aren't you coming with us?" Toneri stood there. "My place is on the moon, with my people." Hiyashi stood there. "Your people are dead." Toneri seemed to begin to cry a little. Someone must watch over their graves. Hiyashi stepped forward and put his hand on Toneri's shoulder. "You are a very kind boy. You're very much like the Hyuga. You, like us, can be blinded by duty and tradition that serves no purpose but to divide people, he said as his eyes met Neji. Come with us and live at our compound. It's as your father wanted. Toneri stood there, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, Hinata approached him. Please, Toneri. Having seen her for the first real time at this moment, he felt his heart flutter. He blushed a bit and smiled. He nodded. Okay, if that's what you desire. Together, they walked through the cave and back to Earth. Returning, they got settled. The first thing they wanted to do was sleep, and sleep they did. Each one peacefully and happily. As Hiyashi looked in on the children, he smiled. He stepped out and looked up into the sky toward the now severed moon and thought about it. They didn't learn anything about what Naruto's dojutsu was, and maybe that was okay. If Hiyashi had learned anything about this, it was that it didn't matter the differences that divided us. What mattered was what brought us together. And right now, he was just glad that they were all together. And that's the end of the story. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be. Perhaps I can make a sequel. That would be fun. Get to follow Naruto, Neji, Hinata, Hanabi, and Toneri on another adventure. Maybe one where they learn more about the dojutsu. I had a few cool ideas about it, and I might just run with it and pop out a part 2. Would you, my precious Amagites, like to see that? If so, like the video and tell me so in the comments. Share it with your friends, and maybe, just maybe, you'll see a sequel to this video. Until then, peace. We just released a documentary about the life of the creator of this channel and the history of how we made it here today. It's super cool and was put together by a professional documentary filmmaker. The doc deep dives into the Amagi's journey and shows off all the awesome stuff that's needed to make it on YouTube. We'll fire a quick link to it down in the description and in a pinned comment. Here's a quick trailer to get you all riled up.
Having this many employees and their families relying on me, that was a lot of pressure for a kid. I was running this multi-million-dollar business while I was still in school. I was getting tens of millions of views a month. There were many times I didn't think my channel would survive. He was stealing my content. I still cannot believe where I am today. I always dreamed of being a YouTuber, but this isn't the same dream anymore. It's bigger.
Looks pretty sweet, eh? Hope you check it out.
Did you enjoy our video? Well, then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.